What happens when one of America's most beloved daytime hosts suddenly collides with a comedian famous for dancing on the edge of controversy? You get a moment so charged, so shockingly real, that even the studio audience didn't know whether to laugh, gasp, or hold their breath. Jeff Dunham, the world-renowned ventriloquist whose puppets regularly fill entire arenas, found himself in a confrontation no one expected. And Kelly Clarkson, the warm, charismatic host, adored for her friendly, down-to-earth charm, revealed a side that stunned her guest, her audience, and every viewer watching at home. What followed wasn't staged. It wasn't exaggerated. It was raw, tense, and instantly unforgettable. But what triggered this unexpected clash? Stick with me, because what started as a cheerful daytime interview turned into one of the most uncomfortable and talked about moments on television. Before we dive into the moment everything went wrong, make sure you're subscribed and let me know in the comments. Do you think Kelly crossed a line, or was Jeff dodging accountability? The episode itself began completely normal. Kelly burst onto her bright, colorful stage with her signature smile, greeting the crowd as cheers echoed across the room. The vibe was fun, relaxed, and perfect for a lighthearted conversation. The energy skyrocketed the moment Jeff Dunham's name was announced. Whether people praise him or criticize him, there's no denying his star power, and many in that crowd showed up specifically for him. He stepped onto the stage, puppet case in hand, wearing that familiar, confident grin. Kelly greeted him with a warm hug, and for a few minutes, everything felt exactly as you'd expect. Friendly banter, jokes about life on tour, and easy laughs. Kelly kicked things off by congratulating him on his new tour and asking how it felt to still be selling out massive venues after so many years. Jeff cracked a joke about never imagining a career built around talking to wooden dolls, and the audience erupted, Kelly included. But that's when the tone subtly shifted. Kelly's smile relaxed, her voice softened, and she leaned in with a question that carried more weight than the casual way she delivered it. She asked Jeff whether he ever thinks about how his material ages as society becomes more aware and more vocal about what crosses the line. It sounded gentle, but the intention behind it was unmistakable. Jeff caught it instantly. His expression tightened as he replied that comedy has always been personal, and his only goal is to make people laugh, not analyze every cultural shift as it happens. Kelly nodded, but she wasn't done. She followed up, more directly this time, asking if he ever worries about offending people now that audiences are more alert and more sensitive than in the past. That single word, sensitive, seemed to freeze the air around them. Jeff leaned back, his voice firming up. He said, "Comedy's supposed to live on the edge. It's meant to make people laugh, squirm, and think. If comedians stop pushing boundaries, the art form dies." The audience's reaction split. Half cheered, half went silent. And for the first time that episode, Kelly's bright smile slipped. She pressed again, asking whether there's a difference between challenging people and just being insensitive. And that is when everything took a turn. Jeff's jaw tightened. The atmosphere thickened, and the tension between them was no longer something anyone could ignore. Jeff paused, narrowing his eyes as he asked Kelly exactly what she was implying. The room went still. Kelly took a breath and clarified that sometimes comedians label hurtful stereotypes as edgy humor, and slapping the word joke on something doesn't magically erase its impact. Jeff let out a short, icy laugh. He said it felt like she'd invited him onto the show just to take shots at him. A wave of gasps rippled across the audience. Kelly's expression shifted, her smile gone. She leaned forward and said she asked him on the show because she respected his success, but she also believed that influence comes with responsibility. Jeff fired back instantly. To him, responsibility was just a polite way of saying censorship. If comedians start filtering themselves based on how people might react, he argued, the entire art form becomes bland and predictable. Kelly disagreed. Thoughtfulness, she said, isn't censorship, it's respect. The studio fell into an awkward silence as the two locked eyes, neither backing down. Jeff's voice sharpened as he insisted that comedy isn't supposed to be polite. It's supposed to be bold, blunt, and honest. His puppets, he explained, let him push boundaries and reveal uncomfortable truths with humor. Then he delivered the line that made the crowd recoil. If you can't grasp that, maybe you don't really understand comedy at all. The words hit hard. Kelly's face tightened, though her voice stayed calm. She said she understood comedy well enough to tell the difference between smart satire and cheap cruelty. And hiding behind a puppet didn't make a hurtful joke clever. It just made it cowardly. That comment lit the fuse. Jeff's face flushed red. In one sharp motion, he rose from his chair, drawing a shocked chorus from the crowd. Kelly remained seated, looking up at him steadily. Jeff pointed at her and said he earned his place in the comedy world. He didn't need a lecture from someone whose entire career, in his words, was built on being nice. Kelly slowly stood, meeting him eye to eye. She told him that kindness isn't weakness and longevity doesn't excuse everything. Jeff let out a bitter, sarcastic laugh, accusing her of being yet another moral gatekeeper, someone who thinks they're above everyone else and wants to dictate what others can say. Kelly shook her head. That's not control, she said. That's accountability. That's growth. The tension in the room deepened, heavy enough to cut through. Jeff snapped that he didn't sign up for an ambush. Kelly replied that these weren't attacks. They were honest questions. If he couldn't handle honesty, she said, maybe he wasn't as secure as he pretended to be. That was it. The moment everything broke. Jeff snatched up his puppet case and stormed toward the exit. Kelly called after him, asking whether he was really walking out just because they disagreed. Jeff paused at the doorway and turned back. His voice was cold as he said, "The difference between us is simple." He claimed he brought people laughter while she only brought people comfort, and in his eyes, only one of those required genuine talent. The audience gasped, some uncomfortable, some unsure how to react. Kelly stood frozen for a moment, then stepped forward and answered with a calm firmness. Real talent isn't just making people laugh, it's making them feel connected. Jeff stopped with one hand on the door, his voice echoing through the stunned studio. He said he'd spent his entire life building connections, giving people permission to laugh at things society tried to quiet down. Kelly slowly shook her head. Laughing at stereotypes isn't courage, she said. It's laziness. Real comedy, she added, pushes people to see the world in new ways. That struck a nerve. Jeff shot back that Kelly lived in a bubble too safe for real risks, too cushioned for edge. Kelly didn't flinch. She said that at least she didn't rely on puppets to say what she was afraid to say herself. Jeff fired back instantly. Those characters weren't shields, they were pieces of him, rooted in real experiences and real perspectives. If she couldn't understand that, he said, that wasn't on him. The audience erupted, some cheering in support, others shouting in disbelief. The studio had transformed into a battlefield. Kelly held her ground. She accused him of creating characters designed to score quick laughs by targeting people already at a disadvantage. Jeff argued that punching down was just a term used to shut comedians up, a tool meant to police humor rather than evolve it. Kelly countered, her voice firm, "Art without empathy is nothing but noise." Jeff snapped back that kindness was simply another word for weakness, and in his view, Hollywood was overflowing with phony smiles pretending to care. Kelly responded that honesty without compassion is cruelty, and maybe somewhere along the way he'd forgotten what being human actually meant. This time, Jeff went still. Her words hit deeper than he expected. He said she had no idea what he'd been through. Kelly didn't waver. She said she'd had her own battles. Nothing was handed to her either. And this debate, she insisted, had nothing to do with fame or careers. It was about responsibility, about how choices ripple outward. Jeff scoffed, dismissing the idea of influence as a trendy buzzword. He said his only job, his real job, was to make people laugh. Kelly replied that when you perform for millions, every joke has impact whether you want it to or not. Jeff shook his head. He said everyone seems offended these days and comedy has stopped being fun. Kelly answered gently. She wasn't asking him to please everyone, just to think before swinging. Jeff said if she wanted harmless humor, she'd get humor with no spark. Kelly shot back that if he couldn't care about people, maybe he didn't deserve the microphone he held. The studio dropped into a heavy, suffocating silence. Jeff grabbed his case again, saying he'd come for a conversation, not a moral sermon. Kelly said it only felt like a lecture because somewhere inside, he knew the truth of what she was saying. Jeff stiffened, insisting he felt no guilt for making people laugh, that he would always choose joy over judgment. Kelly's voice softened to almost a whisper. She said laughter and kindness aren't enemies. They belong together. Jeff didn't answer. He didn't even look back. This time, he walked out for good. The door shut behind him, leaving the entire room frozen. Kelly stood rooted in place, taking a slow, deliberate breath as the studio sank into absolute silence. Then she turned back to the audience, her voice shaky yet controlled. She admitted the confrontation wasn't scripted, wasn't planned, but real conversations, she said, don't always stay neat and polite. Laughter matters, she told them, but so do empathy and responsibility. And she made it clear. She didn't regret asking the questions that needed to be asked. A faint ripple of applause began in one corner of the room, spreading until the entire audience joined in. Gentle, uncertain, but supportive. Meanwhile, backstage, Jeff stormed down the corridor without looking at anyone. Every producer and crew member stepped out of his way. Outside, he tossed his case into the back seat of a waiting car and slammed the door, frustration mixing with something heavier, something he didn't want to name. Doubt. As the car pulled away, he replayed every word in his head, every line, every moment. And the more he thought about it, the less it felt like a victory. Maybe neither of them had actually heard the other back in her dressing room. Kelly sat alone in the quiet. She hadn't wanted things to explode like that. She only wanted openness, truth. But the interview had unraveled before she could catch it. She wondered whether people watching would forget something important. That behind all the opinions and all the arguments, there were two human beings, both convinced they were standing up for the right thing. And the truth is, nothing is ever as simple as picking a side. So now it's your turn. Did Kelly push too hard, or was she right to challenge him? Should Jeff have stayed and talked it through, or was walking out the only choice he felt he had? Tell us what you think in the comments.